Hello and welcome to another tutorial video for Word and Image. Today we are going to go through some tips and techniques in Adobe Illustrator to help with your expressive type assignments, and specifically at the beginning to talk a little bit about microspacing between letter forms, letter spacing, and how to do that. So let's get started. All right, so when letter spacing, we'll discuss in class or have discussed in class, involves all of the spacing in between the letter forms, and it is an important element to consider, especially when you're working with large sized typefaces, display sized typefaces, the big stuff, the stuff that's supposed to grab attention and is more graphically visible to your audience. And so there are a few ways to play around with the spacing between the letters that we can discuss here. There is tracking, and then there is kerning. Tracking is a global way of dealing with the space between letter forms. And it is very simply, well, there's a couple ways to go about it, but you will almost always want to have access to the character panel in one way or another. You can go to Window, type character, and open up the character panel. I'm going to drag it out here so that we have it. I'm going to close this guy here. And I'm going to stick this this fellow right in this column here until it goes blue, so I'll have access to it whenever I need it. I can just click on it. So we have normal, loose, and tight tracking of the letter forms. So normal is just the way it comes out. It'll look, it is the way that the type designer, the typographer who designed the typeface that you're using or the font you're using, has gone through the entire font and has decided what distances every letter from another letter, any character pairs that will happen in any and all character pairs that will happen in a typeface in a font have been figured out by the printer, by the designer, and put into the code that makes up the font, the software that renders your font. So the place that we find tracking, which is this global way of fooling around with your spacing, is up here in your character panel. And it is this guy here with the little double arrow and the VA and this field here. And if it's default, normal, it will be 0. So to set it for loose, you click on the down button or the drop-down menu, and you can set it for loose. That would be 200 thousandths of an M added in there, I believe. That's loose. And if you took that and you applied that to, I'm going to Command A to select all of the text there. That's Command A. If I was to apply that to this guy, you would see that that would open up the text immensely. That would probably be a terrible thing to do to your audience if they were trying to read text, but it might be something of it might be more useful to do something open with a nice big title or something where you want to space it out and make it seem a little bit special because of the space between the letters. One thing you might use tracking for with regards to text is opening up the tracking a little bit globally can help very small text be more legible. So it's something to consider, maybe opening it up. Oops, wrong. Whoops, wrong. Opening it up 10 or 25, even if it's really very small text, to help that become legible for people's eyes when they're looking at the small type in a design. Okay, but then there's also tight. Tight is a way of just getting this nice and tight, of course. They can be too tight where things crash into one another unless you're looking for some sort of, you're trying to make a statement with your tracking and your letter spacing. Usually it's just a little bit globally that you want to tighten things up a little bit to create a more cohesive word form. And yeah, and so that's that, and you can apply that, of course, to all this text here. And sometimes you might apply like a -5 to tighten things up a little bit with regular text weight and size. But if you want to see what it looks like when you go all the way to -100, you'll see that this becomes almost illegible. You would not, again, do this to anybody who is trying to read your text. Okay, so that's tracking. And another thing to be aware of is there's a way to avoid having to go up into the character panel or any of these panels that can control things going on in your type. And you can simply select your text and then hold down your Option key and then use the left and the right arrow keys to do some general tracking. These are larger increments of tracking. So if you really need to be more finesse it a little bit more, you might want to go back to the character panel and finesse it. But with the left and the right arrows, when you're holding the Option key, you can affect that. And I believe if you hold down the Shift and the Option, you get slightly larger increments. Well, maybe not. Oh. All right, it's making me a liar. All right. All right, so that's that. Remember that shortcut. It will save you a little bit of time when you're moving quickly. All right, now we're going to talk about, we talked about global letter spacing, that is the tracking. Now let's talk about custom tracking, or custom letter spacing rather, or individual letter spacing, a local type of letter spacing, and that is kerning. And kerning is generally used to fix some awkward letter pairs that happen inevitably when you blow up a word or words, and you scale it up and you make it nice and big, and for a display or a headline, a display type headline, or a logo or something like that, something that's supposed to be noticed. And when you blow up the letter forms, the space between the letters becomes a little bit, I like to call it horsey. I'm not sure why I do that, but it becomes too much space, and sometimes the spacing can be a little awkward. Like if we look at tawdry right here, and you squeeze your eyes, you squeeze to look at the letter forms. What you're looking for when you're a typographer or a designer is you're looking for an even color overall in your text or your words. And when I say color, I mean not red, white, and blue. I'm red, white, green, whatever. I mean an overall sense of gray in the type. So no letter form or no negative space between letter forms stands out as being darker or lighter than the rest. So if I'm squeezing my eyes at tawdry, I'm looking to try and create also a sort of an equidistance, an optical equidistance between every letter, between each letter and another letter, so that overall they all feel like visually, optically, they're all the same distance from one another. And this is tawdry set on an auto spacing or kerning with regular tracking. And it feels a little open, too open, so we would probably want to track it in. But also I'm noticing that, for instance, the W feels like it's, the A feels a little bit closer to the T than it does to the W, and the D feels a little bit closer to the R than the W because of the awkward, weird shape that a W is. These letter forms that tend to be round or triangular in shape tend to fight a little bit with the square letters. Also, letter forms like the capital T's and the capital L's also have a little bit of trouble when you try and space them with other letter forms. So to fix that, you might do some tracking overall to try and tighten things up. We just found out that we can tighten things up using the left and right button with the tracking and the option left and right arrows. But we might also, besides tightening it with that, let's just tighten it a tad. Although I can see that the Y is starting to crash into the R a little bit, which we might not want. Let's start using some of the character panel kerning presets to see if we can fix this. Right now, if I select all of this, I'm dragging with my text type tool, the type tool, of course. If I haven't mentioned that I'm using that a lot today. And I'm going to take a look at this field on the character panel, and it's set on auto. And there are three kerning presets. There is, if we click down on here, we have auto, optical, and metric. Now, auto is the way that the designer of the typeface felt like their typeface was. It was the best spacing overall for all situations for their letters to be. And it's typically set up so that this type can be read at small sizes, at text sizes. So when you blow it up, it'll often have awkward spacing or strange spacing that is more about legibility when the type is small. And once you make it bigger and you don't have to worry about legibility so much, then you can start fixing things. So auto, also known as metrics in InDesign in Photoshop, they use metrics instead of auto, I believe. That is the basic one. That's the one you want to have it set at for text and normal circumstances. But the first step, if you're doing something nice and big like a logo or a headline, let's try optical. Optical is Adobe Illustrator trying its best to throw some algorithms at it and to fix some spacing. And already it does look better. It's tucked things together. It's made things a little bit tighter. However, I might want to go in and put my cursor with the type tool between a couple of letters, and maybe, and you'll see when you put them in between each letter, you'll see that the number changes in the kerning. That's because it's been given specific, specialized spacing by Adobe Illustrator. Let's go back. I'm sorry, Illustrator. Let's go back to auto and try that too. See, there's all the auto, there's little special numbers there. They're in the parentheses. That means that they are the ones that they haven't been customized. You haven't done any customization to them. Let's go back to auto for the whole word. There we go. Let's make sure the whole word is optical. Okay. All right. It's all optical. Let's put our cursor between a couple of maybe our problem letters. The W still feels a little bit like it is a little out. So I'm going to use the option and I'm going to use the left and the right key to just tuck it a little bit so it's a little bit closer. And, one of the other ones that is always problematic is capital T's being pushed too far away from the lowercase letter next to it. So sometimes you want to tuck it underneath there a little bit to make that feel a little bit chummier. And you can spend a lot of time going back and forth trying to get it right. One of the things I like to do is maybe get a little bit further away with my zoom tool. Just get further away. And see what it looks like. It seems if it's the letters seem distant, the right distance from one another, equal distance optically. It's not a matter of mathematics. It's not a matter of taking a ruler out and specifically measuring how far each letter is from one another, from stem to stem. That is, mathematics doesn't have really anything to do with it. This is an optical illusion, and you're trying as a designer to capture the an even spacing of letter forms and negative forms between the letter forms from one another. Tawdry's looking much better right now, I believe. You could do some other tricks like flip it, make it very small, make it to check it out, just to sort of make it upside down, maybe even just to sort of shake things up so you don't see them as letters and just see them as negative and positive shapes. But honestly, a lot of the times, if you at the very least use the optical to fix it, that can solve a lot of problems. And then, of course, don't forget to track as well. There's a third auto set, or preset rather, and it's called metrics Roman only. Do not use that. Never use that unless you are setting Japanese characters. That is something that's not necessary for what we're doing. It's another version of auto, but it's for a different different purposes. All right, here's a cautionary tale for you folks now that you learned about kerning and tracking, and hopefully we'll start looking at words differently because of this, the spacing between the words being just as important as the actual letters themselves. Scripts are a different case where when you're working with other typefaces, tracking, kerning, that sort of thing is fine. Go for it in most cases. However, if you're dealing with a script, let me get my type tool again, that is a cursive typeface like brush font, I believe this is called, brush script MT italic. This one, it's been around forever. It's on pretty much every every computer out there, it seems. And it is a script that has a cursive linked letters. And in that case, you do not want to select it and mess with the it looks very strange if you break up those with tracking. You track it out and you break up the links. That's weird. And it also looks very strange if you tighten it and all the links break. So all those links are now broken between ligatures or links between the letter forms. So for scripts that are supposed to appear to be cursive, you want to go straight on back. We'll go back up here because I don't have to always jump into the character panel. You can get to the character panel from the control panel without having to open things up. There's so many different ways to get at this stuff, guys. And you just want to set back to zip and have it there. Now, another cautionary tale with scripts, when you're dealing with huge, letter forms and you're making these logos and you're making these display level headlines, that even scripts, even though they've been very carefully put together, when you really get close, you might find that some of the scripts do have some wacky stuff going on, and you might actually need to do some kerning. At this size, I think I'm going to have to do some kerning with the actual kerning field to get really fine kerning in there. So let's see if I've got my cursor between the two, and I will just, these are much smaller increments, and that at least lines that guy up. You might actually, whoopsie, you'll still see that they're not perfectly lined up, but that might not matter, depend on what size you're actually printing at or showing this at. But you'll see that some, there are some fonts that are better designed than others. This one's been around forever, and it gets the job done, but it's a little overly popular and overused right now. However, just be careful that when you make it really big, always check out your letter forms to make sure that they're playing nicely with one another and fix anything that might get screwy. And to keep talking about scripts, there's also scripts that are calligraphic, but they're not cursive. They're not supposed to link up to one another. And so in those cases, you could make them, open them up and close them up and not have to worry about it so much. So there is, you'll sometimes find a typeface like this in the same category as a typeface like this, but this is a cursive typeface, and they're supposed to connect together. All right. I think that's all I wanted to do with this. Cursive, no optical, tracking, maybe some kerning and display font sizes. That's what we're talking about. All right, so we've done a little bit of fixing there. All right, so you guys might want to color some stuff in this assignment coming up. So let's talk a little bit about coloring something. I'm going to hit View, Outline, so I can see what's on my page, and I do have a word on this black background. Now I'm not really encouraging you guys. Well, we'll see what you guys come up with, but let me forget about that. Let's go back to View, Preview, so we can see everything. I believe Glow is in front. Yep, it's in front. So I'm going to select that. So color, let's just use the control panel. We could also do this in the properties panel over here, but let's just use the control panel. And for this project, you're only going to be using either white, black, or gray letter forms. So you don't have to worry about, if you click on this little solid black square here, up in the control panel, this is the fill. and it will tell us what it's going to fill it with. So any of these little chips that you grab will change the color of your type or the object that you're selecting. But we're only going to work with black or white. So you have black here and you have white. Those are the two. However, there's also some grays you might want to use. Now, there's a range of grays right here that you could just pull from. And they're broken down by 10%. So here's a 50%, here's a 40%, here's a 30%, I believe. But if you find the way you want to make your own gray, you can click on the black, make it solid black, and then go up to Window. Hello, Window. There we go. Color, and open up the color panel. And the color panel for solid black, not for any complex blacks that have other inks in them, you can just go down to the K, CMYK in this case, and grab the K and just ratchet it down and change that black to a customized, if you wanted a 38% gray or a 30% gray. Now, if you're working in another color, like well, not a solid, let's try a mixed color like this, that technique's not going to work. You're just going to change the actual, you're not going to be able to do anything other than change the color entirely instead of changing the tint of the color. So there are different ways to make color tints that we will not cover in this particular project. All right, so I'm going to close, I'm going to go back to solid black. I'm going to make that a gray, and I'm going to turn it off. All right, there we go. So that's how we go when it comes to tinting. That's pretty straightforward. All right, and now let's do a little bit of a demo regarding making expressive word, taking a typeface, a word in a typeface, and then making the type somehow reflect the meaning through the some editing, some customization. All right, so I usually like to start on paper and just sketch out a bunch of ideas. So that's what I've done here. And I've set up a bunch of what do you call it? I'm just sketching. So I sketch an idea down. I get the idea. I put the piece of paper aside. I don't scan it in. Who would do that? You don't need to do that. And then I find a typeface that I'm interested in working with. This is Helvetica. You might want to spend a little bit more time finding some typefaces, but Helvetica, it's one of the approved typefaces for this assignment. So Helvetica is straight up on most computers, so you should be able to access it, even if you can't get a hold of Adobe fonts. So first thing you might want to do is do some spacing of your word just to get it kind of set up. So that's where you might want to bring in the the tracking and the kerning, and also just for kicks, you might want to bring down some guides as a starting point. You might not want to do this, at least at this stage, but you could also, dragging from the rulers on the outside of your document, if you don't see these rulers, then that means that you've got to go first up to View and Rulers and show the rulers. I've already got my rulers open. It's also Command R to quickly go back and forth from seeing your ruler. So if I Command R, I can hide those rulers on the side. I also need to be able to see my guides. So you might want to go down to Guides, Show Guides. And then whenever you go to one of either the left ruler or the horizontal ruler and click and drag, it should bring out a guide. I guess I didn't. Let's try that again. Show guides. I guess I didn't release. There we go. So there are my guides. And once they are there, they're kind of locked. I can't move them again unless I want to view, go under guides and unlock my guides so that I should be able to grab them with the selection tool and get them around. I just want one for, the very top of my cap height. These would be the cap height and the baseline that I'm thinking about. And this doesn't need to, again, this is if you're doing a project where you feel like everything's going to be lining up, and you might be messing with things. You might want to remind yourself where the cap height is and the baseline is. That might be of use to you. When you don't want to see those things, if they're in the way, then just simply hide the guides. And if you want to get rid of them all, you can clear them. All right, so I'm going to hide them so I don't see them right now. So once you're happy, I'm going to open this up. I'm going to go into my character panel up here. I'm going to give it, I'm going to set it on optical because that will tighten things up nicely. And then I might just tuck that R a tad more underneath the T. All right. And I'm not going to belabor it, but I feel like maybe that I needs to get a little closer to the, yeah, you could play a little time, spend a little bit more time with getting your spacing correct visually, what you think you got going on. Once you've got it there though, remember that trick to save the live font version. So you have that in case you need to go back if something goes horribly wrong, if you want a fresh copy. Then we're going to select this guy, and with the selection tool, we're going to go to type and we're going to make it into outlines. And then we've got outlines, but we want to maybe ungroup it. So ungroup, just like we did in the typeface portrait. So now my letters should be loose and able to be moved around and fiddled with. Couple tools, now that we've got this all ready to go, couple tools that will help you guys when you want to do some minor customization of letter forms. The direct selection tool is this white selection tool, and if you click down on it, you see you have some other options here. You have a direct selection tool, a group selection tool, and a lasso tool. The direct selection tool will let you simply go in and grab a bunch of anchor points. Whatever it gets over, when you drag it over something, it will grab the anchor points of a path object. Or, if you dragged over everybody, it would grab all the anchor points. But sometimes you might want to just grab 2 anchor points. Say you wanted to do one of the things we can do, which is I want to extend this a little bit. So I grab these nice, the sans serif and these geometric kind of sans serifs are nice, although this is a little humanist. It's kind of a humanist sans serif, but it does have some nice long straight elements that should be easy to manipulate. So I'm going to drag over them. I'm going to hold down my shift key, so I'm going straight when I drag, and I'm going to drag it down so I make these guys a little bit longer. And that, notice I'm not messing around with any of the curves, so those don't get distorted. The curves are the tricky ones. Distorting a curve can make a letter form feel alien to the rest of the font very quickly, but some of these straight bits are easier to manipulate and still make them feel like they're still the same weight and aesthetic quality of the typeface you're working with. All right, so that's one way, and you can grab all of them or just, one of them. I'm going to make these guys a little bit long for my own nefarious purposes. But that just so you can select on an individual element like so, and select the whole form it's a way of selecting all of the anchor points. And also, let's see, can I just select this is called the tittle of the lowercase I. It's the dot on the I. It's called the tittle. And you can select it individually. Let's check these other guys out. We have the lasso tool. So let's say I wanted to be a little bit more creative in what I was selecting. So I want to select the tittle and maybe the top of this guy. So I use the lasso tool to grab those anchor points. Then I go back to the direct selection tool, click, and then hold down the shift key and drag those out like that. So that the lasso tool lets you get a lot more specific about what anchor points you're grabbing, and when you're trying to do a complex selection. And the group selection tool, I don't use this very often, and I believe what it's simply doing is that if you click on one anchor point, it grabs all the anchor points in a object that is grouped together. But I rarely use this, so Yeah, so I would say stick with the direct selection tool and the lassos tool, and I think you'll be fine. All right. And so I've got those guys. I've stretched some things. I've dragged. I can also use the selection tool if I had an idea where I was distorting the I don't, that kind of distortion bothers me with the letter forms. But let's say I had an idea where maybe all the bottoms need to be, all of the bottom terminuses of my letter forms need to be a little bit sharp. I can grab with the direct selection tool just that one guy, and make these guys sharp. All right. But I'm not going to do that because that's not my idea. All right. So the eraser tool should be right here. Click, open that up. You've got a few options here. Now, your version might not have the knife. I'm not going to show the knife, but I think I've got my computer set up to show the knife. There's a lot of tools that you can find that are not shown on the standard tool set here. If you click on these three dots here, it opens up all the tools that are available. And some of them are legacy tools and aren't very popular, so they don't make the cut on this tool set. That's what might be going on if you see three here, but you don't have three. Honestly, I'm just going to show you the scissors tool and the eraser tool, which you can set up to do the same thing as the knife tool. So I'm going to select my eraser tool. And if you don't have anything, I'm going to double click it so that I can make the size of it's a brush basically, make the brush a certain size. I'm going to say yep to that. So now I can see that big old brush. I think I've got it set up that I can, whoops. Yep, got it set up so you can see that. So you can see that brush size. That's great. If I don't have anything selected when I start erasing, it's just going to start erasing everything. It's going to destroy everything. But if I do use I'm going to hold down my command key to change my cursor into a selection key. That's one of the quick things. Hold down the command key or the Apple key and click, it'll turn it into the direct selection tool. Very helpful. But if an object is selected, then it only erases the object that's selected. So in this case, and also if you hit Option and you drag, it makes whoops, let's try. Option drag will make it delete or erase in a box. Just a box that goes and erases a bunch of things. All right, so that's great. Or I might just want to like a little like that. I could do that. Yeah, that might work. That might be one way of going about it, but I want more precision in this. So I'm going to go double click this again. I'm going to put it on size 0 for the brush size. And then I'm going to, I won't select any, I'll just, since I'm going to be wanting to cut all these guys, if I just cut through there, it's a little bit hard to see what you're doing. That's one thing. I'm undo that. It doesn't necessarily show you the cut you're making, but if you know what you're up to, then let's just select the things I want to select and cut so I know what I'm cutting. I'm going to hold down the shift. I can do this rather, and I'll hit the WY so you can see what that did. It's made a weird kind of cut through everything just based on my random path. But if I hold down the shift key and I drag it, it will cut in a straight line like that. So it holds it and it reduces it, it forces it to be a straight line. I want to hit Command Y to go back to preview. All right, and so because I've done that, I can now do my trick, but actually I want to cut it a little bit higher. So let's go Y, and I want to cut it a little bit higher. There we go. And boom. And I'm going to Command Y. And let's see what happens if I try and grab one of these. Oh, they're all separated. That worked out. Very good. So I can grab these guys with my regular selection tool and drag them away to show my idea for trim. Now, you might find if you need more precision and you want to cut something more precisely, then that's where maybe the scissors might come in handy. This example might not be the best example for trimming, but let's say you wanted to remove a very specific part of this guy here. Let's go back, click on our eraser tool, go to scissor tool. And with the scissor tool, if you click on a path, let's say I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click opposite here, down here. If you just click it once on an object, it's really not doing anything for you too much. It does separate the path, but we want to break things off. All right, I've done that. So let's now go to the direct selection tool and see if I can just grab this and pull it off like that. Not pretty. I might want it, see how it's not really, this is shooting off there. It's not really connecting very well visually, but that's not really part of my idea. So I'm just showing it as an example. All right, so I've got my the two ways of erasing things or manipulating things in that fashion. Right on. All right, compound path release. We don't really have to. We'll worry about that later. All right, so I've got these guys and I've trimmed it. But, you know, to give it a little more animation, I might want to get these guys up here and have this feel more like, you know, it's been a little bit more. It looks like it's they've trimmed and they've fallen off, like a bunch of hairs on the floor of a barber shop or something. So I would spend maybe a little bit more time finessing this. There we go. Oh, don't you do it. Don't you do it. This is great TV right here. All right, so I've got my trim. There's my concept trim, and then we got these guys down here, although there might be something that I'm wondering if I've done it correctly. Let's take a look at what might be going on here. If you're too subtle with your concept, in this case, let's go to trim view. Trim view, so we don't see anything on the pasteboard. Someone who wasn't involved in the production of this idea, and who is not a type expert, would come here and just say it looks like the word trim, and they would not necessarily know that you'd gone all this trouble to create a cool idea to express the word, because the concept is too subtle. So when things are supposed to be different, you might want them to be really different. So in this case, having all of my trim bits here to remind people that the parts fell off and they're on the ground, that might help. But you might actually need to make this maybe even more ridiculously strange, so that even a non-professional typographer comes along and sees this and knows there's something odd about those letter forms. They are really weird. I've never really seen letters like that. And then with this to emphasize or to reinforce it, you'll get your concept across. So the question here is, when things are supposed to be different, make them very different so that people notice. But when things are supposed to be consistent, same, then make sure that they are very consistent. In this case, consistency is in the weight overall of the letter forms are all the same, from the same weight, and they are all kind of equal distance from one another in a standard word format. The weirdness is the part that's cut off and that stuff down there, but otherwise, things that are supposed to be different should be very different and obvious to your viewer, so you do not waste your time in not communicating your idea. And also that, you know, different does not include like having some fun or keeping it consistent. Doesn't mean you can't have any fun with the jumbling things. In fact, it would seem, you know, if you start jumbling this, it would be weird to have some that aren't jumbled. Perhaps keep them consistent but yet different, so it looks like a mess. Sometimes you want it to be a mess. Also, I might think about composition here and think, well, does it look cool if it's like jumbled on the floor of my right at the edge, like it's fallen and it's right there? Or do I want it to be floating in the air? So that's another consideration. All right, I think I like it, the idea of them feeling like they've kind of settled on the floor of my format or my composition. All right. Speaking of composition, let's get back to our trim view or a non-trim view so we can see my notes and get back into trim again. Now, when you are doing this and exploring an idea, what I find is that in the rough stages, that it's often possible for you to be feeling out an idea and end up with some very strange, some letters that are kind of like not consistent when they're supposed to be. So in the case of this trim, if you went with this and it was the final, one of your 3 finals, and you wanted to make this something you're going to put on the wall next time, then you want to go back in and clean things up and refine. Think about composition, think about scale, and a few other things, and really telegraph your concept. And maybe the first thing to, you'll notice maybe when you had all the letters loose, maybe one got a little cockeyed, and so it's no longer straight up and down. Maybe one, like this R, which I can notice, but you might not notice, was scaled up and then scaled down again, but it's not the same weight, slightly heavier than the rest of the letter forms. And that would stand out to a professional, and even maybe a non-professional, because you're going to be showing them very, very little on some of these compositions. It's just black letters on white background in most cases. And in those cases, little differences will show up that might, in a complex design, might not show up in a complex design, but in a simple design like this, the heaviness of that R compared to its friends, look at how thick that is. That stem on that R is a lot thicker than this guy here. That's something that might be fixed. Now, it might be a lot simpler, depending on the complexity of your idea, to just go back, get that original trim, and just use that guy. Just come back and start from scratch, and just start from scratch, make it an outline, and just do it once and it'll be, you won't have to perhaps go in here and then get let's ungroup this and all the stuff you might have to do to fix this. Like, oh, well, how do I make this straight? Well, I might have to drag out a vertical guide to help me figure out how to getting really anal retentive here. You might be able to simplify your life if you simply start from scratch to fix a few things. You'll have everything the right weight, everything straight up and down the way you want it to. In this case, not every case everyone wants to be straight up and down, but for our trim, I do. So just remember, you want to fix misalignments, rotations, minor rotations, things that aren't aligning up, like maybe something's not sitting on the baseline with the rest of the friends, that sort of thing. Scale, weight, and then think about, let's hide those guides again. Again, hiding guides is simply view, show, and hide guides, but I'm using the quick key, which is Command semicolon, or not Command, yeah, Command semicolon. Think about your composition. Now, our compositions are supposed to be square, but let's say I've got a horizontal format. Why is the trim way over here? Does that make sense? No. Think about your composition overall. How do you want to compose it? Well, this seems like a composition that might just be simpler to be centered, roughly, straight up right in the middle. Optically centering things are one of the things that you want to consider. You want to think optically. Again, trying to center things mathematically with type is weird. I could take a box like this, a block. I'm going to group this guy together, make sure these guys are all grouped. Nope, they're not grouped. I'm going to group them. Actually, let's use a clean trim, not this crappy trim. Pardon my French. Let's take this trim. We'll bring it over. And we want to center it. So you could center it by selecting everything, selecting a object that is the same width of the page, and then going up. And you'll see in the control panel, there's something called alignment, which is window align. But you can get to all these things right here. And these guys will do, this one is centering things vertically. So if I do this, it will center things vertically. Ooh, it centered too many things. I did not group this. I better group that. Object group, object group. Now that it's a whole group, when I center it with this larger object, it should just center it. And then it doesn't quite center to the page. You can tell the align panel to center to page if you'd like. All right, now let's get rid of this. I'm not going to worry about the trim. Trimmings could be off center. Let's get those guys down there where we want them. But notice if you squeeze your eyes and get further away from this in the trim view, that it doesn't quite feel centered. And that's because the T is weird. It's got this big white space right here that's sort of interrupting things. And for that matter, when we cropped everything for this T, notice now that the T that was once felt kind of spaced correctly from the R, now kind of feels like it's too far away from that R. So you might want to have to, these are the kind of things you might have to do to fix things when you're refining your final. Now, you might have a better luck. Let's hide all of these stupid, hide the bounding blocks, hide edges. That might be the one I want. Yeah, I don't want to see edges. I don't want to see the edges when I'm moving things around. So I might want to, instead of using a ruler or something, I might just want to squint my eyes and just feel like what feels optically centered if it's supposed to be centered. All right. And that might be a good to go like so. All right. Let's go back out of trim view. We're about almost 50 minutes into this. I apologize for the length of it, but it will be easier. We also can crop, depending on your what you're trying to do, you might crop it or have things come off the bottom of the page. There, we're cropping right here by taking that stuff off the bottom. So just think about what it looks like on the page, compose it, think about your white space creatively and consciously. The white space is it's a big part of your design. It's not static unless you're putting everything just dead center without any thought. And sometimes your solution is just dead center, and that neutralizes your negative space all around your white space. But that might be the way to go for certain assignments, or not assignments, but certain solutions for this project. All right, last demo. We're going to do a couple quickies here. We're going to talk about object command, a compound path. In some cases, like with a lowercase I, is this still a font? Nope. Let's say we've got a lowercase I, and let's do something with a sans serif just for kicks, or a serif rather. I'm going to make that guy into a outline. Outline. Oops, under type, create outline. There we go. So your outline is here. Now, if I ungroup this, and it's an outline, yep, it's all path now. If I ungroup this, it doesn't give me the option. Ungroup. All right, let's see here. All right, I'm still trying. I'm trying to. It says it's ungrouped, but I can't get the tittle, the dot on the I to move. Why is that? I want to take it away or remove it. Well, that's because this is a compound path. It's a little more complicated than a grouped object. So go to Object, down to Compound Path, and go to Release. And once I do that, I can now grab individual objects. Same thing can be said for any letter form that has a closed off counter in it, like D and O here. They also are compound paths. I'm going to ungroup using my quick key to ungroup, which is Shift Command G. And I'm going to get this guy. And if I wanted to create dot, I could try with the direct selection tool. I could go in there, perhaps. Oh, we can't see things because we have view hide edges. So we want to show the edges so that we can actually see what we're working with. There we go. So I'm going to select the edges, and if I just hit delete, I could get to dot and solve it that way. But some solutions are not that simple, or sometimes you want to save the counter as an object. So in that case, remember to click select object and down to compound release. Once you do that, it separates. Let's look at the Y. It separates those things. Now they're two separate objects. All right, so perhaps you have some use for that counter. depending on your solution. The same thing would happen with the D there. So that's dot. I'm just going to delete this because I really don't have any reason to have that. So that's a dot, and there's pop. Let's look at pop. Let's solve pop. How did I do this? Did a couple things. Let's get a little closer to this pop. I'm going to ungroup. I don't have to worry about the compound paths here. I just have to worry about the O. And the way I solved this was I went to my shape object here and I went to star tool. And I double clicked. I think I have to double click on that star tool. Oh, no, I just, instead of clicking and dragging, you click on the page. Let's go click, and then it'll open up a star window. And you want to play around with the radiuses and how many points on your star. I want to have 25 points. Let's say I want to have a radius of maybe 1 inch. That's how big it is. And then the inner radius is much smaller. So let's say 0.125. I hope this will work. And we'll hit OK and see what that looks like. Oh, it looks like that. That's perfect. And then I will center that into my O. There we go. And then I will select both the O and the circle. Maybe with the direct selection tool, just dragging over the two. All right, now I've selected both of them. So if I'm moving them both, I can move them both. Now, the star is on top of the O. That's very important. The star has to be on top of the O, and that's going to be used to cut things open. So I'm going to go to Window. I'm going to go to Pathfinder, which opens up the options for pathfinding. And I'm going to use, it's in your handout, I believe, the different things you can do with Pathfinder. The one that I use the most is minus the front. So it takes the front object and removes it from the back. So if I click on that, it clicks it like that. And I actually lied because we are going to need to use the, I believe, because if I go to object ungroup, oh, maybe it will work. Let's see. Yep, it works in this case. The compound, it's not a compound path any longer. And so I can then just take it and start popping out the bits to make my pop a little bit more energetic. Whoops, whoops. And that's how I made pop, using a star symbol and the Pathfinder panel to cut up something I wanted to have cut up in somewhat reasonable ways. That Pathfinder can also do things like, chop one letter out of another letter, perhaps. Let's see what happens we do there. Chop it up. Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily follow the rules of the assignment, so be careful with that. But that's what that guy can do. All right, I think that's all I wanted to show you guys, and we've been doing this way long enough. I hope you found that interesting. If you have any questions, contact me, and thank you for your time and attention. Have a great day.